Friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honored to be with you this evening to deliver this year's anti-corruption lecture for TI UK. Throughout my career, most significantly during the 7 years I served as Nigeria's finance minister, fighting corruption, something that I've been thinking about a lot over the past year is how to achieve rapid and equitable worldwide access to COVID-19 vaccines. It is a goal that we are yet to attain. Today, barely 8% of Africans are fully vaccinated compared to 2/3 of people in rich countries. I frequently say that vaccine inequity is wrong for the obvious moral reasons, but also for practical and economic ones. Leaving much of the world unvaccinated increases the chance that dangerous new variants will emerge and derail the health and economic recovery globally. You all have seen the sharp reaction to the Omicron variant. Even before we fully understood the science, there were border closures against some countries and new lockdowns. The IMF estimates that falling short on vaccinating the world, failing to achieve 70% coverage in all countries by the middle of 2022 would mean foregoing as much as $9 trillion in global economic output between now and 2025. Now you're going to say, why the hell is she talking about vaccine inequity when she should be talking about corruption? Because when I began to think about what to say today, I realized that what we say about vaccine inequity is very similar to what one can say about corruption. Corruption corrodes the moral and economic fabric of society. It undermines values and value systems and erodes trust in public institutions and the notion of a fair social contract. It represents a misallocation of finite resources away from public services, infrastructure, and other investments that can help poor and vulnerable people improve their lives. It raises costs for business, and in the long term, it is a roadblock to lasting economic growth and development, leaving societies poorer and more unequal than they otherwise would have been. My late mentor, boss, and friend, Jim Wolfenson, former president of the World Bank, used to liken corruption to a cancer. Being a late-stage cancer survivor myself, I could really relate to that analogy. And corrupt practices by a small percentage of the population can harm a country's reputation and compromise the functioning of its economy. Corruption creates vicious circles. The notion that everyone is doing it can help corrupt behavior spread throughout an organization or country. The more widespread corruption is in a society, the less it is perceived as hurting the reputation of a public official or business person. Low accountability to citizens begets corruption and embezzlement, which weakens tax collection, public service delivery, and public trust in state institutions. Corruption is path dependent, but it is possible for governments, businesses, and societies to choose a different path. This evening, I'll look at a few themes about corruption and anti-corruption efforts, drawing on my experience in Nigeria. And as Director General of the World Trade Organization, I will also look at trade-related aspects of corruption, from misinvoicing and counterfeit products to how WTO rules for public procurement can make contract allocation more transparent and accountable. When public monies are stolen, they are often sent abroad to countries not generally thought of as corrupt, where cottage industry exists of bankers, lawyers, and accountants, and others who launder and sequester the ill-gotten funds. It is disingenuous to pretend this equation has only one side, namely developing countries like Malaysia, Nigeria, Brazil, and so on. The Pandora Papers, like the Panama Papers before them, shed light on this shadow economy of tax avoidance, luxury homes, and shell companies. I was surprised that the recent leaks did not get more attention this autumn. I think this might be because we're all preoccupied by the pandemic. But reducing corruption will be an important part of building back better our economies and societies. So it is an issue we cannot afford to neglect. The academic literature differentiates between grand corruption, the large-scale diversion of public resources for private interests, political corruption where influence peddling biases resource allocation decisions, and administrative corruption where public funds are wastefully or fraudulently misallocated and misused. In practice, the three often go together, as do steps taken to counter them. I would add a fourth type of corruption, individualized bottom-up corruption, which can be every bit as insidious for a country's society and its institutions. I learned that such demands for extra payment were by no means isolated in the education and health sectors. Turning back to grand corruption, the most egregious instances in Nigeria's history came, of course, under the military rule of General Sani Abacha from 1993 to 1998. I have described this in my book, Reforming the Unreformable, Lessons from Nigeria. During those years, he and his family and their associates looted and sent abroad Nigerian public assets worth billions of dollars. Unbelievably, truckloads of foreign currency were literally carted away from the Central Bank of Nigeria and directed to foreign bank accounts. Contracts for public health programs were inflated far beyond their real value and the difference skimmed off, instead of going to protect the health and lives of Nigerians. Growth and poverty reduction stand little chance against corruption on so great a scale. There is a coda to this story. Following Abacha's death in 1998, it took a 7-year battle for lawyers working on behalf of the Nigerian government to convince authorities in Switzerland that money parked in their banks there should be recognized as proceeds of a criminal enterprise and returned to the Nigerian government. In 2005 and 2006, President Obasanjo's government, in which I served as finance minister, worked with the Swiss government to eventually repatriate to Nigeria $500 million traced to Swiss banks. I can tell you that despite UN, the United Nations, OECD, and other anti-corruption conventions to which most developed countries are signatories, recovering these monies back in the early to mid-2000s, and even now, was and remains a very difficult task. National legislation, very conveniently, I must say, made it almost impossible to pry these corruptly stolen funds loose and send them back to countries where they belong. To ensure proper allocation and accountability for the repatriated funds from Switzerland, the monies we got went to the federal budget and to capital projects with monitoring from Nigerian and Swiss NGOs. One of the worries of governments repatriating funds, and quite rightly so, is to ensure that the monies returned are not misappropriated all over again. Hence the trouble we took to foster transparency in the use of the funds through monitoring by both local and foreign NGOs. To assist countries impacted by this type of grand corruption to recover their assets with support and monitoring by the World Bank. Over the next 15 years, hundreds of millions of dollars more were repatriated to Nigeria from Liechtenstein, Jersey, Switzerland, and the United States. It's not over yet, as more assets are being identified for repatriation to the country. The UK is often seen as one of those countries on the demand side of stolen assets supplied by corrupt individuals from developing countries. And again, we just heard about it. It has not always been easy to recover stolen assets from the UK. Nigeria has had a bit of luck in the past, but only for recovering tens of millions of dollars, not billions. Real estate and other immovable assets belonging to corrupt government officials have not been as easy to trace, seize, and return as one would like. Recent initiatives like the proposed register of foreign beneficial owners of UK property are a move in the right direction. I would say the same for this new move by President Biden and the report in the Financial Times last week that the administration is contemplating new regulations that would expand reporting requirements for all cash purchases of residential real estate in the US, on the grounds that such transactions are often run through shell companies and used to launder money. My question to you as TI UK is, what are you doing to get the UK government to be more active and forthright in handing over immovable assets purchased with corrupt money to those countries from which the monies were looted? Why does TI not have a ranking for governments receiving looted funds or stolen assets? The debate on corruption tends to focus on developing countries, but this is not because citizens of developed countries are more honest and upstanding than their counterparts in developing countries. It is because most developed countries have over time built stronger institutions and systems designed to better withstand corruption and actually hold perpetrators accountable.